Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second day of our Advanced Excel Charts for Finance Professionals workshop. Once again, I'm your host, Zachary Bailey, a Senior Digital Marketing Specialist here at Vena. And although I may not be wearing my I Love Spreadsheets t-shirt today, I am just as excited for today's workshops. So we'll get started in just a few minutes, but before we do, just wanted to go over three quick housekeeping items to make sure that we all get the most out of today's workshop. So first, if you are interested in earning a CPE or CPD credit for the workshops, please make sure that you answer the three polling questions that we'll have at the end of today's session, and also make sure that you attend today's workshop for at least 50 minutes. Assuming you meet those two requirements, we will email you your CP or CPD credit within the next week. Second, if you would like to follow along with these workshops, please make sure you have your Excel workbooks open. The Excel workbooks were emailed to you prior to the event, but if you forgot to download them, don't worry. We just posted the download links to the workshops in the chat below. And finally, just like yesterday, we encourage you to get involved with the workshops. So if you have any questions, if you want Chandoo to go over something a second time, if you want to get some clarity on something, please don't hesitate to post your questions in the Zoom chat, and we will do our best to answer them as we go through today. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, it is my pleasure to once again introduce your teacher for these workshops, Chandoo. So if you missed yesterday's introduction, Chandoo is one of the absolute smartest people you can follow when it comes to learning about data analytics and visualization. Chandoo has a terrific YouTube channel that I highly recommend following if you're looking to grow your Excel and Power BI skills. So with that, I am going to pass things over to Chandoo to get us started for today. Over to you, Chandoo.
Thank you, Zach. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. And today we are going to continue our discussion from where we left off yesterday. I'll do a quick recap and then we will jump into the things. So if you remember, we started our day yesterday with this thermometer chart where the intention is to show you how you could build a graph that doesn't exist in the menus on the ribbon of Excel by combining various format settings and overlaying with some shapes, etc. So this is what we started off our day with, and it's a dynamic one. So if you change your values, so if I put 50, I would see this. I find that thermometer charts are an excellent topic starter, like a conversation starter, especially if you have one big goal and then various other things that kind of contribute to it. So it could be a budget versus actual kind of a conversation. It could be for a fundraising situation where you need to raise maybe $10,000 and you are monitoring that. So all of those things, this is a very, very good chart. And then what we did is we started building a variance chart wherein we got some products, their target and actual sales. We calculated the variance both in absolute values as well as in percentages. And then we used the target sales and the variance absolute values to construct this graph. Again, this is not something that you find directly in the menu, but it is actually a collection of two individual charts. One is a column chart and another is also a column chart, just neatly lined up one underneath another and grouped together as an object. So it all looks together and then tells that picture. And I've shown you how to add these kind of icons as well. Finally, we talked about how to construct a year-on-year change chart wherein we were showing what has happened last year, what happened this year, what is the percentage change, how to add a symbol next to it through the symbol keypad, and how to bring them all together in a graph like this so that you can see what is the current value with respect to previous year, how much we have changed either up or down, all in one neat view. So this is what we have covered yesterday. In case you need a copy of this file, I will provide this file after today. I'll save the whole thing and then I will send it to Zach and team, and they will get in touch with you and then share this workbook as well. but I have already given you two workbooks. One has the sample data and the other has some already built charts. Many of them are similar to what you see here. So today what we will do is we will take it up another level. We will add a bit more complexity to it. This will give you a chance to experience what to do when you have a little more data than usual. So I got this data here. I'll paste it in my blank workbook, blank worksheet here. Let's just quickly understand what we have. This is a same kind of a business, but right now, earlier we were only looking at one value per product, but now we have, so we have one value per individual store where we sell these products. So we got stores all over New Zealand and Australia. So we got stores in Wellington, Auckland, and then Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Those are the cities, and we sell the same product. So for each product in each store, how much was my November 2020 sale and how much is my November 2021 sales? That information is maintained. And what we want to do is we want to now visualize all of this in a graph. We'll start off with what happens if you try to make a visual directly, and then we will understand how you could kind of improve the situation. So for example, if I select everything, all of it, and go to this is something that you may have not tried, but if you are not even sure which way to go, like which chart would work, you could try the recommended charts. So we click on the recommended one, and this is really impressive. Like, I was actually hoping to see multiple bars or multiple columns, but Excel suggests that I should make a pivot chart. You see that this is actually not, this data is not directly there, it is actually pivoted. So Excel is suggesting that you should make a pivot chart here because there's a lot of data points, which is a very, very good suggestion in itself. But if you want to make a regular chart, this is what you will end up with. So I'm going to show you what happens with this. You will get something like this. This is a very busy chart. So you have 6 products. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 products, and then 5 cities. So 35 data points for last year, 35 data points for this year. So more than 70 data points. And if you add labels and store names, then it kind of gets really overwhelming. So when you try to put all of this there, while the information is all there, it is very hard for us to understand and appreciate what is going on. So this is not a chart that you should use. Well, this kind of a thing works very well when you have small amount of data. Like, I have only this much data. We literally made a column chart like here and here as well. That is fine. But the moment you have more data, you should try to think of ways to improve the narrative so that you are not just making the chart, but going more from the chart to kind of unearthing what's happening and then presenting or giving user choices. So that's what we shall do. So we'll not do that. Instead, so here, when you have so much data, again, just as earlier, we need to figure out what is it that you want to say and then work in that direction. So because this is a class where, you could probably leave a chat message suggesting some things, but, we'll just assume that the messaging that you want to tell is how well an individual store is doing. So let's just say that is the starting message. You could kind of flip this. You could also say how well a product is doing across the stores, or you could also come up with different messages. But let's just say the focus is on a store. So I want to zoom down to a store at a time and then understand what is happening. So let me present you with 2 tricks here. The first one is rather simple. We would take the product. For now, we'll just imagine our focus is just on November 2021. So I'm gonna pick product column, hold on, control, and select the November 2021 column. So just this much data, and then we will insert a column chart. We'll get a full column chart like that. Okay. So all my products across all the stores are listed here. And then at this point, what I'll do is I'll just make the first row nice and big so we can move this on the top. You'll understand what's going to happen now. And if I now apply filters on my table, so filter, then if I filter for, let's just say Auckland, you notice that as the chart data gets filtered, Excel will also filter the chart automatically. So if you don't want to spend too much time polishing and massaging things, and it is for something quick and easy and just need it like that, this is a very good option. You don't even need to do anything. In literally 2 seconds, you'll make the chart, you will apply the filter, and then boom, it's done. You could even take it to next level, but this is the first technique. Again, most people do not realize this, but anytime you filter the data that is attached to a chart, the default behavior is chart will also get filtered. Okay. There is one problem with this approach though. Actually, there's a couple more problems, but I'll show you what the one problem is. I'm going to paste my chart right here instead of on the top row. We'll kind of restore the things. So we'll have it like this. Then see what happens if I change to Melbourne. So we get this, and then now if I go add more like Brisbane, and suddenly the chart also kind of grows very big. Okay. This is also one of the default behaviors of any charts that you place on the canvas that is on the spreadsheet. What's going to happen is by default, the chart's location and the size is kind of attached to the cells it is there, the cells on which it is sitting. So if the rows are hidden, then the chart gets smaller, but if the rows become visible, then the chart kind of expands. This is again default behavior. So this is why I kind of moved it up there, because we were filtering, the filter will only act from row number 3 onwards, but row number 1 and 2 are not filtered. So that's why I moved it up there. One quick fix for this kind of a thing is you can select the chart, press Ctrl+1, the same shortcut that I showed yesterday, which is the format shortcut. And then from the chart options, you want to go to the last one, size and properties, and expand the size, expand the properties. And there is an option called move and size with cells. So if I say don't move or size with cells, what that will do is it will kind of lock your chart's size and position to whatever you fix it as. So once I said that, I can kind of make it like this big, and that will be my chart size irrespective of what filtering I do. So if I have all of them, it'll show all the data. But if I have just Sydney, it'll show Sydney data, but the positioning and the size is kind of fixed there. So this is one problem. There's other problems as well, which is, it can kind of get very busy very quickly. If I uncheck the filter, then I'm having all data there. So we're back to our original problem, which is there's too much data and we want to kind of come to a individual store focus without overwhelming our audience. I'll delete that. The next technique that we will examine is we'll make a chart where there is an easy option for the user to pick a store, and then for that store, the information will be shown. So this is where a pivot table will be very handy. So we'll insert a pivot table. You can just select any cell in the table, go to insert ribbon, click on the pivot table. We could set up the pivot table right here on this page, or we could do it on a separate tab. Because it's easy for us to understand everything together. So I'm just going to leave it here, but you don't have to do that. You can leave the new worksheet option, and I will insert my pivot table there. Okay. So we'll click OK. We'll get that. I'm assuming most of you have created pivot tables in your life so far. So I'm not going to go into great detail here. I'm just kind of working with the assumption that you are familiar with the terminology and everything. But if you're not, feel free to post a question and I can gladly show you what I'm doing. But in this pivot report, what we want is, because our focus is on an individual store, and then within that store, I want to see what is happening by the product. So we'll take the product and put it to the row label. we'll get one row per product. And then let's just start the discussion with what is happening right now. So November 2021. So we'll put the November 2021 values here. Right now, we are not looking at any individual store. So my report tells me what is the sum total of all the November values across all the stores for each product. So not all the November, just across all the stores for each product. So I clean, if I want to kind of add up all the I clean values, that's the 2,470 there, and I shade is 3,280. And at a grand total level, this is what is happening. Now, how do we add a focus on an individual store? So this is where I can right click on the store and I can add a slicer. I'll get these nice buttons. We'll see what happens with this. Again, I'm assuming you have played with slicers before, but if not, this is a very good functionality of Excel using which you can kind of make things interactive and fun for your audience. So instead of them going and manually filtering and all of that, a slicer gives you one button per option, and all you got to do is touch them or click on them. So I click on Auckland, I get my Auckland results, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Wellington. So this is a very powerful and very useful feature of Excel. And what we will now do is we'll take the combination of the slicer and this data to turn it into an interactive graph, and then we'll kind of improve it, modify it, and understand the limitations and all of that. So we have this and we got that. And what we really wanted is a graph. So I'm gonna just click anywhere on this pivot, and we'll start off with inserting a chart from the pivot table. Whenever you put a chart on the pivot table, like from the data that is in the pivot table, then Excel will automatically call it a pivot chart. Again, there are some subtle differences between what happens within a pivot chart versus a regular chart, but from a look and feel perspective, they're essentially same. Pivot charts are linked to a pivot table, whereas a regular chart is linked to either a table or a range of cells. So here I got my data. I'll say insert. We'll go with a bar chart. Made a few column charts yesterday, so I'm gonna just start off with a bar chart for now, and we'll place this there. So Damilola asks, can you show how you inserted the slicer again? Sure. So you want to select any field in the pivot table, and then this will show up on the pivot table fields list here. And from here, you just right click on the store and add as slicer. So that's the option. I'll give you the slicer. And that slicer is when you insert a slicer, irrespective of whether you make the chart first and then insert, or the other way around, like whichever way you do, because the chart is linked to the pivot table and the slicer is on the pivot table, by default, the slicer is also, not even by default, the slicer is also linked to the pivot chart. So that means if I click on Auckland, I'll see Auckland numbers here, Brisbane numbers, Melbourne numbers. Again, this is where I say slices are extremely powerful and very easy to use feature. Like it's literally just a click, and you took a normal chart and now you have an interactive chart, which means you don't have to make these 5 charts. You can make this combination, give it to your boss, and she can click on whatever she wants and then see the result. In fact, they can click on any one item. They can click and drag to multi-select items like that, or they can click on one, hold down control and select items out of order. So now I'm looking at all the 3 stores together, their sales, total sales for each product, and I can clear the filter to look at all of them. So this is a very, very powerful and easy feature. Anyhow, we set that up. We're seeing something doesn't feel right to me. If I go and look at the ordering of these products, they seem to be all over the place. Like I mean, they're in alphabetical order, in fact, reverse alphabetical order, but this is not a logical way of reporting because the focus is on a store, and within the store, what we are selling, it makes good sense to kind of show the best performing product on the top and the worst performing product on the bottom in terms of number of items sold. This will give a better narrative than just laying them out in some sort of order like this. So one quick way to do this is I can right click on one of these numbers, sort largest to smallest. Okay. If I sort my pivot table, by definition, because the pivot and pivot table and chart are kind of linked, so if I sort the pivot table, the chart will also be sorted. So we'll say largest to smallest so that our best product goes to the top and the worst product goes to the bottom. Now let's go and see here. You can see that this is also sorted, but it is in the reverse order. It's time for our kind of like a mandatory dad joke of the day. So a bar chart walks into a bar. Okay. The bartender says, "Why are you upside down?" That's the joke. This is because every time you make a bar chart in Excel, Excel puts the order of items in the reverse of the data. So in my data, I clean is on the top, I wash is at the bottom. But notice what is happening here. I clean is at the bottom, I wash is on the top. So this is how the bar charts are by default structured. I mean, there is a technical reason why this happens, but we don't need to know that. From an end user, like for me as an analyst who's making this stuff, this seems pointless that the ordering is reversed. So what we want to do is we want to flip this. So we can select this axis, Control-1 to format. And there is this option here, categories in reverse order. Again, if you have worked a little bit with these charts, I'm sure you have come across this one by now. So if I do this, then I'll get the flipped version of the chart. And also the axis moves to the top, which is again a little bit of usability improvement on this. We get that. Notice that you might think, oh, the sorting was done when we picked Auckland, so it will only be for Auckland. No, it is actually a sort behavior attached to the pivot table. So if I sort on Brisbane, I will get Brisbane data, and then Excel will say, oh, wait, let me sort the data for you, because again, I have to sort because the slicer has changed at pivot tables. So it will change. So it has eye wash, eyeliner, eye shade. In some other place, it will change. So eye shade is now on the top and eye wash is third product for Melbourne. So this is how the sort order is also dynamic. You don't have to do it again and again. Set it up once and it's cool. So this is really already giving you a better messaging in terms of what you want to present. There are some challenges though. Challenge number one is this combination itself doesn't look nowhere as good as this graph or this graph. These ones look like they're properly packed together, and you know, we kind of not only made the visuals but also ensured that they're formatted and presented in a nice way. Whereas here it feels a bit clunky. There is a lot of unnecessary labels and words and all of that. So this is the technique, but when it comes to actually applying certain formats and things like that, one thing that I find somewhat hard to work with is that pivot charts have limited options with respect to adjusting certain things. For example, we could still get rid of these things. We could move this there. We can go to the analyze ribbon and disable field buttons. So those buttons are also gone. Move the title here and do all the things that we did yesterday, which is, you know, give it a proper title, sales by product. That'll show up there nicely. We could even adjust the gap width and colors and all of that. But there is only so much you could do before you will kind of come to a place where you have to throw up your hands and say, this ain't gonna work for me. I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is my November 2021 data. Now, remember, we not only have November 2021, but we also have November 2020 data. And we would like to do kind of like a comparison between these two to, to show what's happening year on year. Okay. So if I want to add November 2020 data and then do something with it, and I go here and then drag November 2020, you'll get the values here. Again, fairly straightforward. You understand what's happening. You come here now, there's two columns, two bars, and the coloring seems to be same, but it's not a big issue. We could kind of set the gap to 10%. And then change it like that, so you could kind of see what happened now, contrast with what happened previously right there. And this is all right, but if I want to do a little bit more, like maybe show a custom label here, or not even show this bar but just the label, but use that value to generate the label like the way we have done it here, then the pivot chart option is not going to work, because pivot charts by definition they must show everything in the pivot table. So if the pivot table has these values, then they will be presented here on the pivot chart. There is no way to say only that column should go into the graph, not this column. So it kind of gets a little clunky there. But it is still very much interesting and valuable. And notice that the sort order is retained. So it kind of presents a more dynamic messaging that, certain products have improved with respect to last year. But this one, eyelasher, it has gone down significantly compared to last year. So that then eye glow as well. So this is coming through very nicely. So we'll kind of call this as our first visual of the day, and then I'll show you another technique further down here, which uses pivot chart, but then a different option as well. So to remove those buttons from the graph, select the graph. I think, yeah. Select the graph and then go to pivot chart analyze ribbon. And from here, those are field buttons. So if you click on that, they will not appear on the screen. So field buttons, you want to toggle them off. Okay, so that's the first one. If you have any other questions, post them in the chat. Otherwise, we will continue and talk a little bit more about same data, same pivot, but then more technique. So these numbers, Jane asks, how did you put the numbers on the top? I didn't really move the numbers. We took this axis and clicked on categories in reverse order option. So that option there, categories in reverse order, and that's the one that kind of flipped that there. All right. The second technique that I want to show you is we will again use the slicer to control the interactivity. Remember that even though I'm talking about a store slicer, you could kind of flip the whole thing, make a slicer on the product and report on the store as well. Or if you have got a third column, you could use that as well. Anything will work. So this is a versatile technique that can apply for different types of narrative, different types of stories that you want to tell. We'll keep the store thing because there is no additional value in generating multiple slicers. So, but I just want to keep that idea in your mind. So the next technique that I want to show you is using a different type of charting methodology rather than just the insert and then chart options. Megan says, may I see your series option for the chart columns? So I guess this one. So yeah, put the overlap to -10%. So there's a little bit of gap, and gap width at 50. And then just colored them differently. Okay, as I'm saying, for the next graph, again, same data. So in the next one, we will use a different type of data visualization approaches. Excel has many other techniques. So this is something that I want to introduce. And so to start off, we'll take this pivot table, we'll go to the design ribbon, and from here we'll remove the grand totals. The grand total is good, like it's a novelty thing, but we're not really using that number anywhere on the screen in our outputs. So we don't need that there. I'm just gonna remove the grand total. So we know that this is literally our data. And then again, we will have to, every time you make a visual, you want to kind of have a mental picture or clarity of what is the objective. So here the objective is what is happening in a store, within the store, how the products are doing, and then what is the variance with respect to last year. So same kind of picture like the way yesterday we did, but through a different graphing technique, so that you will understand how that could apply. So I'll copy my pivot table data, Control C, go further down somewhere here, right click, and then paste a link. Notice that we are not pasting anything, we are pasting a link. This is important bit, because what we have done is we have pasted kind of like a linked formula. So this formula is linked to I2, which is my row label. This formula is I3. This formula is J3. So what this will let you do is, here is a range of cells that have the values, but the values are coming from pivot table. So if the pivot changes, these values will change. So if I go to Melbourne, I got 750, 570 there, and I get the same values there here as well. Might be thinking, why are we doing this? Why can't we just use the values in the pivot directly? This is because when I have data in a pivot table, the only way I can consume it is either read the pivot table or make a pivot chart. Those are the only two choices for me. Whereas if I have the data in a cell, I could do literally anything that I want with it. I could kind of make some graphs from it. I could write additional formulas on it. I could, color code them and do whatever else I want. I could even, just show part of the data by removing these additional rows. So we're only looking at top 4 products all the time. Remember, the pivot is sorted. So whatever I want, I can do, but I can't really do that kind of thing with pivot very easily. So while pivot is good for calculating things, it's not so good for presentation or controlling things at an end level. So this is why many times when you see other people do stuff in Excel, they always use pivots like an intermediate thing to build stuff and then make references like this. Anyhow, let's not get too technical. We got the values here. We only need November 2021 value for display. And this value, we need it so that we could calculate the variance. So instead of 570, what I want is, I want to take this value divided by that -1. So we'll get the variance as well with respect to last year uh, in a percentage terms. So these numbers are randomly made up, so certain variances are like very high. And then we will call this as variance. November 21. And then this one, I can just call it as product. We get a table here, which has my November value and then the variance with respect to previous year nicely in a table. But all of this is I'll just print some borders here. Is dynamic. So if I change to Auckland, I'll get values for Auckland. Again, automatically sorted. Sydney, I'll get Sydney values with that. Okay. The next thing is here I want to show just not 890, but also a graphical representation of 890. So we could use a bar graph, but you have already done the bar graph. So the next one that we will try is we will use, just select these numbers from home, conditional formatting, data bar, and add a solid data bar. So you can pick any color. I'm just gonna, let's just go with blue, and you will get a data bar. This is something that many of you may have done already, but if not, what it is doing is it will fill up a bar in the cell. The width of the bar will be in relation to the number. So the default behavior is whatever is the highest number will be filled up 100% of the cell. So the entire cell gets filled up and everything else gets scaled down in relation to that. So 890 is full cell. So 780 is this much, 320 is less than half. So that's how the data bar works. Let's just examine this a little bit more. I can select this, go to conditional formatting, click on manage rules, select the data bar rule and edit it. So you can examine how the rule is applying. This is the color. If I change the color to, for example, something like that, I will get that color. Again, very obvious. If I don't want to see the number, I can just say show bar only. And now I'll just get the bars here. I'm not even seeing the number. So this is another way of making a bar chart. But the beauty of this bar chart is it is tied to the cell. So if the cell kind of gets narrow, then it gets narrow. If it gets wide, it gets wide. Needless to say, if the cell gets taller, it will get taller as well. Okay. So this bar chart is tied to the cell. And the second advantage of this kind of a method is if you have just 6 or 7 products, you could use a bar chart like this. But if you have 100 products, this bar chart will look really busy. And no matter how big it is, it's just going to look very, very busy. So whereas this kind of a thing is really scalable. If I have 100 products, I just have to scroll this down and I'll get that. Because they are lightweight, they're not really having any of that access, title, legend, and all of that other stuff. They are very easy on the eyes and they make natural sense because of the tabular structure of your data. So highly recommend that you incorporate these into your workflows every now and then to not only just add a bit of variety, but also overcome some of the limitations of the traditional charts. So data bar, you can find it in the home, conditional formatting, data bar. There are a few other options as well. Color scale is there and some icon sets as well. But we will just use data bars for this particular part of the presentation. So we get November 2021 sales. I'm going to go back to my manage rule, edit this, and quickly uncheck my show bar only. Let's make the color a little bit more brighter and interesting. The dark, this color is not really popping. So I'm going to use this color. And if you want, you can even set the minimum and maximum. You could either leave them to automatic, which means the highest value will always be 100% of the cell. Everything gets scaled down. But here, because we are comparing one store with another, you may want to think a little bit more about this. I will leave this part out for your imagination, but maybe you may want to adjust the maximum to a bigger value than the 100%. This way, what happens is you can easily compare between one store and another store as well without always going back to maximum. So we'll leave that there for now. And we get this. So this is nice and cool looking in, and you can still align the number. So I can put them on the left or right. For now, I'll just put them on the left so that they're easy to read and the bar is also coming through. For variance, again, we will use a data bar so that the variance will also come through like this. You can see that because some variance values are negative, automatically Excel will show the bar in that direction, and then it will color code them differently. So you got a positive color and negative color. Again, this gives a very powerful dynamic to it. Let's just see, there's a question here. Yeah, so Mary asks, can you please repeat how you remove the values from the bar chart? We will see that here. So this is my variance. As I put this, I realize that there is another problem that we need to counter, which is our variances are all over the place. Certain places there is a 240% positive variance. I'm pretty sure there's a 240% negative variance as well in some other stores. So the variance seems to be going all over the place, and this is going to create a problem for us. So I will undo this step. We will leave the variance as it is. And then in the next cell here, I'm just going to say equal to that. So we get a duplicate of the variance. I do want to present my variance. So that's what this cell column is for. And in this column, we want to make it a visual representation. So we'll select this thing, conditional formatting data bar, and then manage that data bar rule. So you can select and edit rule, or you can double click to edit. From here, you want to click on show bar only, because we already have the numbers there. We don't need the numbers here. This column is for the graph part. And minimum and maximum, instead of automatic, I will set them to a number. So if the variance is too high or too low, we don't really care, because the number is anyway shown. We just want to show the bar up to certain point. This is not accurate representation, but it will let us overcome some of the limitations of the screen that we have here. So I'll say just get the bar from -1 to +1. So that means the variance in either direction up to 100% will be depicted. So -100% to +100%. And then the positive color needs to be that. And the negative color needs to be, we'll just adjust the colors. And so we get this nice little variance graph here. Notice that here and here, the variance looks similar. So even though it's 240%, the graph will only show up to 100% and then kind of cut off. So it will give an indication that yes, you had a positive movement or negative movement. And then we will start off by first removing all the borders. This one I'll merge and make it bold because this is my heading. Next up, we'll select all of this. You could do individual border formatting like this, but I find going to Control-1 and then from here, so Control-1 is the format shortcut. From here, I can go to border and I'm going to change the color to, let's just go with that, and then just add only the horizontal borders. So we'll get that. And then this thing here is my heading. So I'll put that there. And we got a nice fancy table, but it is not a static table. So this is my, we'll just call it that. I don't know what to name this chart. And if I move this slicer, Control X and place it maybe here. So I can now click on Auckland, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Wellington, whatever I want, I can select and I can see what is happening for that in a very simple way. Because this method is inherently scalable, I could kind of have 50 products and all I have to do is just drag this down 40 more cells or 50 more cells and I'll get all of them and everything will work nicely. So this is another technique that you should try to incorporate into some of the workflows that you're doing, because here it is scalable, it is lightweight, and it lets you add more detail without compromising or using too much space. Notice how much space we have taken to do this, only less than 1/4 of the entire screen space. And I'm already at 175 zoom. So if I go to 100% zoom, which is how you normally work, notice that this bit alone is just about 10-15% of the screen. So you have bigger screen and you could use that to show more valuable information. Whereas same amount of detail, but this chart is almost as big as this. And if I have more products or whatever, then it kind of even gets bigger. So there are some places and reasons why you may want to add this to your chest of tools, basically, that you will use depending on what you're doing. Yes, the other question is, do multiple selections still work? Yes, you could pick. So I can select Auckland and Brisbane. So right now we're looking at these two cities together. These are how my sales are, and the variance looks like this. I could kind of clear the filter, so I'm looking at everything, or I could click Auckland, Control, and Wellington. So we're only looking at New Zealand market and understand how that is happening. Okay, so this is the second type of a graph. Mary asks, can you repeat the color changing for this? Sure. So I'll show you here because this one already has it, so it looks a bit confusing. So if we go data bar and apply, the default color is blue and red like that. If you're not happy with those colors, you can select that, go to conditional formatting, manage rules, select this rule, edit, and the color that you change here is for positive. So if I say the positive color needs to be green, and then the color for negative, you have a button here, you just click and you can change that as well. So you could say, I want it in that color. And so you'll get two different colors like that. We don't need this. I'm just gonna do all of this, but all right. So this is our second graph. So we have seen two different graph techniques, as well as the other idea that you could apply filter on the data, and whatever you filter, the chart will also filter. So we have this and we have this. Notice that irrespective of how many values are there, like here and that, they're both still linked to this slicer. So this slicer is kind of talking to here and there. So if I click on Auckland, this will change, that will change. Brisbane, Melbourne. So whatever I click, every time I click on the slicer, it is kind of connected to the chart and this table as well. Well, not technically to the table, it is connected to the pivot, but the pivot is connected to this data. So they're all kind of interconnected. So this will just the idea that you could use slicer, and the idea that the same slicer can control different things on the screen should open doors for you, especially if you're building something more complex where people need to select what they want. So they can select a department or a business group or a product or a location. They don't have to pick multiple places. They just select in one place and it will kind of impact everything downstream. So that's the beauty of slicers. I'll quickly show you what other things are there in the other workbook that I gave you. This is because in this workbook, there's a little more stuff that I have, but I don't think I'll cover everything that is there. So there's two other things here. I want to maybe I think we'll talk about this one because this will so I'll quickly demo this first so that you can understand what this is. I'm just trying to figure out how much of this we could actually realistically accomplish in 30 minutes. I mean, I could talk about it, but there might be some questions. So this is basically a sliding chart that it's kind of like a different spin on the same data. So the bottom graph here is showing me sales of all the stores together for each of the products. So 7 products, so all the stores together, everything is shown here. And using this slider, I can pick on any one of the products. So for example, right now we are looking at eyelasher. Whatever product is highlighted, the individual store breakdown for that product is shown there on the top. So this is that. And then on the top, there is a dynamic title that kind of gives you a little bit more like what is happening to the selected product. So eyelasher makes up 30% of all the sales, ranks 5 with 2,490 units sold. I think I got an emoji there because I was just trying to show emoji as well. So that's the thing. Someone is asking, I think, Luis, can you send a copy of this file? These files are all sent to you. I think if you look at your sample workbooks, there's 2 workbooks. The second workbook is the one that you have there with all of these graphs. So this is something that I plan to cover, but I think this is going to take a little bit longer for us to work through all the specifics. And it's not very complicated. It just takes a little bit time to explain certain things. So I'll leave parts of it because I know others you have covered, but parts of it I will leave out. Instead, what I'll do is I'll kind of improvise and show you a little bit more on how we could kind of enhance our pivot chart so that it tells more meaningful and powerful story as well. Okay, so we got all of this. So what I will now do is I'll add a new page, and in this page we'll just build the chart. The data is already there, the pivot is already there. So here we'll just build a chart. So and here we'll start off by, so the data is already there. I'm not going to copy the data, but I'll make a pivot because we do have to use the pivot chart for that. And I want to use another slicer so that this page can have its own slicer. So we'll go select this table, insert a pivot, and this pivot should go into my day 2 worksheet. So we'll just put it here somewhere on the screen. So we get a pivot table on the screen. And then this pivot is exactly like the other pivot. So we'll add a slicer on the store, and then product goes here, November 21 goes there. So this is pretty much it. And then we could kind of have what we want. Right click and then just say sort largest to smallest. So this is the steps. And then we got our products, they are sorted, and now I can pick a slicer. So far, it's literally the same steps that we have done earlier. And then we'll also add November 20 as well. And we could now make a graph. So we'll just insert a bar graph. We could have, at this point, used the trick that I showed yesterday, which is we don't need to copy this, format this chart. We have already done the job there. So I could select it and apply the format painter option. But I'm just going to quickly do it again because some of you may have missed that step. To start off, we don't need the legend. We don't need these buttons. So we'll just turn them off and select this axis, format categories in reverse order. So the axis gets flipped and things go up. And then we will add a chart title on the top. Next up, we're going to pick one of these and then set the gap width to 50%. The top one is blue. So the bottom one, what we will do is we will just set it to a dull shade of blue as well. So what happened now is the strong blue color. What happened previous year is the dull blue color. So this is my chart, literally same type of chart as this thing here. Here we have sales by product as title, but everything is same. I can click on that and I can see that. So no mystery so far. Right now, next step that we want to do is we want to make the chart title a bit more meaningful. So instead of saying sales by product or sales by product for selected store or something, we want to make it the title as something a little bit meaningful and context giving. So for example, again, this is where a lot depends on what is it that you want to communicate. But I'll just show one or two ideas. So idea number one is, because we are picking a store, okay, so we'll assume majority of the time we'll select one store, not multiple items. So because we are picking a store, I want to say the title as Melbourne sales, okay, for our products. So that's the first idea. We could then think about like a caption as well. So Melbourne sales for our products. And then, for example, a caption could be like a subtitle could be iShade is bringing in 13% of the sales, or iShade in this case, because that's the best product on the top. So that's the caption. So we'll figure out how to add such a dynamic title so that the title will change every time you click on this, and then how to add a caption, how to make all of this whole package nicely so that everything looks like a crisp, nice looking visual on the screen. So we'll have to do some calculations. I think I have got too much space on the screen. Delete these columns. So this is because I need to show you as well, like everything. So we got the numbers and chart and everything. And the first one is we will generate the title. So we'll have title in a cell. And here the title needs to be, so whatever store is picked. So right now we picked Brisbane. So it needs to have that sentence constructed where picked store plus sales by product. So that's the thing. So we need to figure out what store is picked. I can see on the screen what is being picked, but nowhere on the cells anywhere the data is coming through. So the step one is we'll select this entire pivot table, Control C, copy it. You could go anywhere else. I'll just paste the same pivot table here again. So copy paste the same pivot. And in this pivot, I don't need any of this stuff. So I'll remove all of them. So this is just a blank pivot, but it is copy pasted. And here I'll put the store on the row label area. Okay. I'll just repeat the steps verbally, copy paste the original pivot, remove everything and put the store. So now this cell T4, okay, notice what's happening to that orange colored cell. As I click on another store, that cell will tell me the name of the store. Okay. There is also a grand total label there. I'm just going to turn that off. We don't need the grand total label. So only that thing is there. Whatever store you pick, it will say. In fact, if I pick multiple stores, it will say all of them. If I pick everybody, it will give all the names as well. So this is kind of like a separate pivot table, a dummy pivot table really. The whole purpose of that pivot table is to tell you what is being selected. There is actually a name that people use for this kind of thing. It's called harvester pivot, but you don't even have to call it harvester pivot. You can call it whatever you want. As long as there is a place that gives me what I've selected, I can construct my title here. So the title would be, pick one store, is equal to T4. So that gives me Auckland, ampersand, double quotes, and then write rest of the sentence. So Auckland sales by product. So we'll get a sentence here. I'm going to color this in green color. So this sentence says Auckland sales by product, but if I click Brisbane or Melbourne, it will give me that relevant thing. Now all I want to do is I want this sentence to appear as my chart title. Okay, so this needs to go here. So this is where the next thing is, which is you select the chart, click on the chart title, go to formula bar, click there, and then say equal to. So Literally all we are saying is chart title is equal to, then point to the green cell. Okay. I'll just do a quick screen drawing so that makes sense. We click on the chart title, go to the formula bar, say equal to, and then point to the cell where the title is generated. That's all we're doing. Chart title is equal to this. This is a very interesting way in which, and then when you finish that, press enter. Now you will have a title that is dynamically coming from a cell. Okay. So at this point, it doesn't matter. None of these need to be even on the screen. They could even be on a separate sheet. It doesn't matter. So I can click on Auckland, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, whatever I want, I can click. There is a disadvantage of this approach though. If I click multiple items, it will only see the very first one. You might be thinking, why is that the case? This is because that's how our formula is written. So here we are having 3 cells, but the formula is only paying attention to T4. And that's why that thing is happening. So if you want, you can get a little bit more creative with this formula. Instead of T4, you could write more complex formulas there. I'll leave all of that to your imagination. So that's the title. We get a nice title there that says what's happening for the selected store. We generate a subtitle as well. The subtitle needs to have a sentence that goes along the lines of our best product and what percentage of sales it is bringing. So we'll construct the subtitle here. This is where I'm making that. So first we'll name the best product. This is equal to, obviously the very first row label will be our best product. Because we have sorted the pivot table, our best product will always be in row label 1. So I clean as our best product. Sales of that is equal to this. Total sales is equal to this. So percentage would be this divided by that. Okay, 21%. So now I can construct the sentence, subtitle sentence. This is equal to, we'll just say our best product, comma, within brackets, I clean, sells this of all sales in Auckland. Okay, our best product I clean sells. I wanted to say 21%, but it will say 0.2072 whatever of all sales in Auckland. So here again, we could go back to what we did yesterday. We had to do this, but we couldn't get the answer. So then we used the text function 0%. And then it'll come up with that. I'll post this formula in the chat window just in case if anybody is requiring that. And we will get this. So this is our subtitle. And to add the subtitle to the chart, all we have to do is make room for it. So we'll slightly reduce the plot area so that there is a little bit of room on the top. And go to insert while keeping the chart selected, insert, shape, and then click on text box. And we will add a text box to the chart. We'll have to do it again. So insert, shape, a text box, and then text box again, same as chart title. While keeping the text box, formula bar, click on it, say equal to, and point to this. So it'll come up here. Because it's a text box, I can do all my formatting as well. So I'm gonna adjust the font size and make it nice and big. We don't need that like that. In this one, let's just say this color. We'll apply some quick format adjustments for all of these things. And our graph is done. Our slicer is done. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to make everything look together nicely. That's the last thing that you will do. So I'll make this slightly bigger. Again, you can use the Alt key, hold down the Alt key so that it kind of snaps to cell grid. I'll make it this big. I'll take my slicer, I'll kind of push it slightly inside. And none of the cities are too big, so I think that wide is enough, and that'll work. So this is that. We'll select the chart, we'll go to format, and let's fill it up with a, this is something where you will have to try out a few different things. So for example, if I go with this color, these are all very dull colors, but I can't see what's happening in the last year. So I'm just gonna go this way and pick this, and I'll make it a bit stronger so that it comes through, so that that is there. And then we'll select the chart, go to format, shape effects. Let's just start by adding a little bit of shadow to the right so that it kind of comes on the screen like this. And then this slicer is there behind it like that. And at this point, if I turn off my grid lines, so view no grid lines, I'll get a nice little picture that looks like these two are working together, and I can pick this. If you want, you could also right click on the slicer, go to slicer settings, and uncheck the display header. What that will do is it will just give you buttons instead of the header. There is no specific, the header is good, but if you want to take a little bit of control over that, then you could do that. And then now you could use this cell to say, pick a city without having any of those additional clear filter button there. And yeah, so that's one way of kind of taking the chart, adding a little bit of extra title and other things, and then making it look nice and clean like this. You could even add some additional format settings for the slicer itself. You can go to slicer and apply a slicer style. There are some many built-in styles like that I can apply, or I could even create a new slicer style. And if you want, you could do that. I don't really, for this, it's not required, but you may want to try it out for certain other things in your work situation. So that's how we could kind of take this to the next level, add the titles that are meaningful, add subtitles that are meaningful. The reason why I showed the title part is because if you observe here we are using some of those techniques. The title is generated, but it is all dynamic depending on what you're picking. So this is something that you might wonder how that is coming up. So that's why I introduced that. Rest of the ideas you could kind of figure out if you play with this file, you will immediately understand. So this file is provided to you, and I'll send a copy of this workbook as well, which I'm pretty sure Vena people will be able to communicate with you as soon as possible. So that's the concluding part of my lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to ask me questions. If you have any doubts, I'm more than happy to help explain them to you.
Sure. So why don't we give it a minute or two just to see if anybody has any questions. And then if not, we can move on to the CPE and CPD polling questions before we close out.
So Christine asks, how did you add the subtitle? So the subtitle is actually just a text box. You can select the chart, go to insert, click on shapes, and select the text box shape, and then just add it to the chart, and then click on the formula bar equal to and point to the cell. So this is whatever that cell reads, that's what this text box will say. And then you can size it and apply font effects and colors and all of that on that. But because it is a text box that we added after selecting the chart, you can't literally move it out of the chart. It is kind of attached to the chart. So if you try to move it out, it won't go. So it's bound to that chart. Phil asks, can we make the slicer a drop-down selection? We can, but not tied to the pivot table. So with pivot tables, the only way to interact with them is through a slicer or a report filter. And out of those two, slicer is the only one that I can move around. Report filter will always be on the top of the pivot. So not with pivot tables, but you could use drop down to talk to an individual data set and then get it there.
All right, so we'll do last call for any questions for Chandoo. So I think we've got, Chandoo, I think we've got one question here. Okay.
I'm just understanding where. So the first question that I think it's Mayraps 27 asks is, how did you label the slicer type on Pie Slider? So this is not a slicer. This is actually a form control. But the rest of the technique is similar. So I guess maybe that's explaining. And then Paul asks, should there be a legend to determine the years? Which is a very good point because there is no legend here. So I would probably add a legend or at least illustrate that through something else on the chart that the two bars correspond to this year versus last year. We were kind of, at least I was not even thinking about that. So we could start off by putting a legend and then move it there. And if you want, you could improve that. One problem with this legend is it is tied to the pivot table. So it will read something like sum of November 21, sum of November 20. Those words don't make any real world sense. So you want to probably have them like sales November 21, November 20 or something like that. Or add another option there. Sandeep Jain asks, how many years of expertise are we talking here? Oh, you're probably asking about how many years of experience I have. I have been using Excel since 2006, so about 15 years of working in this. But this is my full-time job. I talk Excel, I write about it, I make videos, and I sell courses, and I teach people. So I happen to know a lot more. But I think what works for you, you will have to develop, and nothing. It'll take a while, but it's not very hard either. And there is a lot of buttons and things that you don't even need to know. So yeah, I would probably focus on what is immediately needed and then slowly adding that kind of like 1% improvement mindset to it so that over time you become very good in this.
All right. So with that being our final polling question, that is going to bring our two-day workshops to a close. On behalf of all of us here at Vena, I want to thank you all for joining us, and once again, thank our awesome instructor, Chandoo. If you're looking for more events and workshops where you can learn and connect with other finance professionals, check out plantogrow.com. There's always lots of exciting stuff going on there. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about Vena's complete planning platform, you can visit venasolutions.com. Once again, take care. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.